right, everyone, we're about ready to begin. Thank you all so much for coming tonight, for supporting our bookstore. We love doing events like this, and you guys are the reason we're able to, so thanks for coming tonight. I also want to remind you, you are not just in a bookstore right now, you are also in a bar. So feel free to get some food, something to drink at any point during the event. You are more than welcome to go up to the bar area there. We have tons of great events coming up. I'm just going to tell you about a couple real quickly. This Thursday, Jim Obergefell will be presenting and signing his book, Love Wins, The Lovers and Lawyers Who Fought the Landmark Case for Marriage Equality. Jim was the plaintiff in the landmark Obergefell versus Hodge decision, which is what legalized gay marriage in all 50 states. So we're really excited about that. A ticket for 2 comes with the purchase of the book. Then on July 30th, we're having a midnight release party for the new Harry Potter book / play. This one's actually just for grown-ups. There'll be alcoholic butterbeer, tabletop Quidditch, all sorts of fun stuff. So if you pre-order your book, you get a ticket for 2 to the event. So tonight, for the main event, we're so excited to be hosting Mark Danielewski. He told me how to pronounce his name correctly. He's the author of the cult classic best-selling novel House of Leaves, as well as The 50-Year Sword and Only Revolutions, which was a National Book Award finalist. And he's here tonight with the 3rd installment in his 27-volume familiar novel, Honeysuckle and Pain. So let's give him a round of applause.
I know what you're all thinking. He brought a hoodie? Does anyone have a copy of House of Leaves? Can I borrow it? Let's start at one beginning. So this is from the back, some of Zampano's notes. July 27, 1991. Make no mistake, those who write long books have nothing to say. Of course, those who write short books have even less to say. August 7th, 1992. How did I end up here? I know, of course, I'm referring to the itinerary I followed, but that hardly helps me understand the whys any better. I still walk out into that dusty courtyard and stand amazed. Amazed that I should have ended up stuck in such a shithole. Then I think to myself, not only did you end up here, you're going to die here too. Of course, Hollywood is the land of the blind with churches for the blind, so in my case it makes a certain sense. You think I'm bitter about being here? Yes. You think I'm bitter about this grave I live in and that bed of weeds I scratch around in? You think I am bitter about dying? What do you know? You know nothing about bitterness because you know nothing about love. Get out, get out. No, stay. Please stay. Let us read something. Forget everything I just said. It's not so bad. I'm just old. And you know a good deal about love, and I would like to think I know something more because of my age. Let us read something. So, it's a bit of a dance reading from volume 3 when there are 2 preceding volumes, and I don't want to give anything away, yet at the same time I want to give as much as you need, as we need, to make of this moment something unique. I know it's special for me because when I'm on a book tour I usually go to sort of the major cities that the publishers think are important. So to be here for the first time in 16 years is a thrill, and it's been a very warm welcome thus far. This chapter is called Hyperion. My being can never be washed away. Lone Wolf and Cub, Volume 3. Most dads, when they get a day off to spend with their 11-year-old kid, especially when it's like August and not far away from the kid's birthday, which is like in September, they go straight to Anaheim for Mickey, or to Magic Mountain for X2, or at least to the ArcLight for a Pixar flick, Or at the very, very, very least, they go to a mall. Dove had taken Xanther to a sewage treatment plant. He was on some kind of recruitment training assignment at Fort Irwin, near Barstow, and he drove like 3 hours to pick up Xanther at 7 a.m. Though for Dove, getting up at 4 a.m. was pretty much like sleeping in. Even before she climbed into his Jeep, the questions started pouring out. Who was Irwin? Did Fort mean like the ones in John Wayne movies they'd watched together? Did the Mojave Desert have sand dunes? And what's a brigade combat team, or even just a brigade? And how does a division mean a bigger thing if its name means divide? And what had Dove done so far? Like yesterday, was he outside of the fort on the sand dunes shooting things? To which Dove chuckled and shook his head, and it took Xanther the rest of the drive to figure out that he'd gone to the dentist. Xanther didn't like going to the dentist. Do you know why we floss, kiddo? Dove had asked. To get the gunk out? To disrupt the colonies. Colonies? What's called plaque, a sticky stuff that builds up and attacks our teeth. Now trust me when I tell you, young lady, teeth are something you want to take care of. They're these rare white things that give us pleasure throughout our life and give us bite. Our inheritance, our means of survival, our right to rule. Their enamel is the front line, and that line needs to be won every day. Dove's friend, Ralph Chironi, Char, had orchestrated the tour. He was, as he explained, a wastewater operator, grade 3 solids. He'd worked at the Hyperion treatment plant for the past 2 years, and he was pretty excited about the place. More so when Dove started firing out his own questions, and boy did he have a lot, getting Xanther wondering if maybe she got her question song from him. Dove didn't stop. Everything from gallons per day, 340 million. That'll fill up the Rose Bowl 3.5 times, Char had answered proudly, and we can still handle 900 million gallons if it's storm time. To service area, whatever's uphill from us, Venice, Santa Monica, Culver City, Beverly Hills, El Segundo, Glendale, celebrities, they flush their toilets, we get it. To odor treatment, shock dosing like to manhole cover pick holes, the maze sewer systems, primary treatment versus secondary treatment, Archimedes screw pumps versus waste centrifuges, to chemical agents versus filtration options, to the use of chemicals, ferric and ferrous chloride, as a settling agent. Is that right? Settling? Verbatim. Char pointed out the on-site cryogenics. See the ice on those pipes? Sometimes negative 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And the 5-mile outflow, 180 feet down on the sea floor. Dove asked about biodiversity and ecological dead zones. He asked about sludge reduction, thermoclines, heavy metals, and turbidity. How is she remembering all of this so perfectly? Shh. Xanther wore a hard hat to protect her head, more like from all the information than from anything falling. She also had to put on a hairnet. Head lice possibilities, Char explained. Some kids we take through here, you know, from some of the schools. That fact about lice, but also the question Char made out of some of the schools, like Belvedere Middle School, Thomas Starr Kane, was alive in her head as they reached the clarifying tanks. There were 36 in all. Char paused by final clarifier 5E, another 16-foot deep circular tank with clear water running over metal teeth before being sluiced out to pumps that took it all out to sea, 5 miles out. One gull perched curiously in the center. We're going backwards here at your dad's request. Next up came a first-hand view of the enormous concrete underworks, a labyrinth, dense and hollow, lined with pipes. Xanther lost count of the stairs down. Check this out, Char said, pointing back at a concrete hallway that seemed endless. You're looking at 2/3 of a mile straight. Hyperion is the biggest treatment plant west of the Mississippi, 144 acres. They filmed Logan's Run down here, Planet of the Apes, Star Trek. That's been disallowed since 9/11. No pictures, please. The digesters came next. Talk about strange. 20 huge eggs suspended underground above concrete cups. 4 stories underground, but they can withstand an 8.5 earthquake, 2.5 million gallon biosolid capacity, 128 degrees Fahrenheit. Anaerobic bacterial processes take about 3 weeks to destroy, dyslexic, I guess, to destroy the pathogens. And the resultant methane that we pipe to the scattergood plant next door helps recover 80% of our energy. We're nearly self-sufficient. They took the elevator to W. That's for walkway or wow or way up here. Char said, smiling at Xanther, even if it was a fleeting thing, disconcerted by some whatever Xanther could never guess. Char looked around a lot, like at some old netting near a stairwell, because birds flew down into the labyrinth below to build nests. Happy nests can't keep nature out. Or at some orange pipes for flaring off the excess gas, steam's silver, effluent is blue. Or toward a grassy dune place fenced off by the sea where shades of sky flitted and settled, the blue butterfly preserve. Maybe Char just needed something to distract him from the smell, which Xanther had noticed kept getting worse and worse. Those air scrubbers, he pointed out proudly, hardly helped, no matter their bleach, caustic, and carbon. Xanther soon had the sleeve of her shirt pressed over her nose and mouth. Not that it helped much. By the loading dock, it was useless. Xanther even tried squeezing her nose through her shirt. Class A biosolids around the clock, trucks coming and going. That one there, 79,000 pounds gross. Gross was right. Gross black steaming stuff getting shipped north to some farm in Kern County. Nothing, though, compared to the headworks. Even Dove pinched his mouth tight. Xanther thought she might throw up. Once Dove had told her a story about a dog that wouldn't stop puking. Staff Sergeant Rensley, through the blunt instrument of his voice alone, trained that dog to keep the puke in his mouth and swallow it. Xanther had been 7 at the time when they were living in Athens, Georgia, and she was wetting the bed. The wetting stopped, though never the seizures, no matter how hard Xanther tried to swallow those. Anyway, she wasn't a dog, and besides, if Xanther had thrown up at that moment, she wouldn't have swallowed anything. Xanther would have aimed, and not just to splash Dove's shoes, more like chest-high, direct hit. Char didn't look so comfortable either, and he worked there. Down in this big gray pillar of a building, he seemed even more distracted, eyes dancing everywhere as he mumbled on more about sluice gates, the 8 blue bar screens, curiously numbered 2 to 9, pointing out in the halogen orange glow of the place where the mechanical teeth dragged out rags, tampons, plastic wrapping, and all that yickety-yak, don't talk back crap. Slats of slanted metal drooling brown refuse. Biosolids, not shit. Biosolids, not shit, Char kept mumbling as he led them around to the other side, past a pipe labeled foul air, to a hole in the concrete slab floor where all the dark water flowed. Just arriving, still untouched, raw sewage. Where it all begins, where we should have started this tour, Char sighed, checking his phone, his shoelaces, his watch, phone again, some greedy fly buzzing their ears. Muscles in Dove's jaw, big muscles too, began to flex. And then the part that Xanther's mom has always hated. What stands for those 2 silver bars that stand for captain snapped sharply into view. Why the hell do you keep jerking your head around like that? Dove barked. Huh? Oh, sorry, Captain. ADD, I guess. What's that? Attention deficit disorder. That's something diagnosed? No, you hear about it, though, online, the news. It means a short attention span, Char nodded, trying to smile. Like I like to channel surf. It drives my wife crazy. That's poppycock. You ain't got no disorder. You just got afraid somehow. Wow, did Char sag then. Like a poked balloon too sad to pop. Talk about how badly you wanted to look around then. But he didn't. ADD's just a fancy name for scaredy cat, Dove continued. Trying to see what's coming after you, or trying to not see what's coming after you. Private First Class Chironi, I know you better than that. You're no fraidy K. Get back in your skin. Look steady. Walk ready. Yes, sir. Later, when Dove stepped into a restroom, Char had whispered to Xanther, "I actually am a scaredy cat, but I'd do anything for him. That means for you too." Kind of weird. Char had even looked grateful after Dove got surly, relaxed too, and he definitely didn't fidget as much. But before that, back by the hole, Dove had squatted down and turned all his focus on Xanther. Weird as well, because she also began smiling again. Her strength, which she hadn't even realized had slipped away, returned. All thoughts of revenge vomit vanishing, the smell too. Xanther dropped her shirt sleeve from her face. "You're not afraid either, kiddo. Stare a thing in the eye, know it, and let it know you know it too before you let it go. You're a mud. Don't forget." Xanther nearly shouted, "Yes, sir," jubilantly too. Instead, she did something she's only managed a few times in her life. She looked straight back at those Flint eyes and didn't stop looking until Dove blinked and even looked away. Had he been afraid? Well, he sure was smiling, winking then, and softening fast, before nodding one last time at the sickening flow running beneath him a few feet away. "Awful, kiddo, isn't it? And by all measures of decency, we shouldn't be here. We should be at Disneyland or stuffing buttered popcorn in our yaps. But I don't get to see you so much, what with my line of work, where I go, what I'm meant for, what Char here had the smarts and courage to get out of." Dove looked at his friend. "I mean that, Char. You served honorably. I'm proud to have called you one of my men," before returning to Xanther. "So, kiddo, I don't want to waste what few hours we have together pretending the world's some ride with guardrails. I want to respect your time, even though you're 10 or 11, even though you might not get this now, but maybe will later." Actually, this is where she dropped her sleeve. "So I want to tell you something I know to be true, tell you something that shapes what I do, and it's not particularly sweet, and some might even say it's a little cruel." If less distracted, Char was back to looking uneasy. "There's a lot of talk about unity and oneness, especially that Buddhist bullcrap, which you'll come across soon enough, as well as other hippie garbage your mom likes to think she believes in. Anwar, too. Heck, don't get me wrong, I'd like to believe it too, but the way the world works, that's not what I see. That's not what I know. I've been to China, India, I've walked their roads of enlightenment, but all I saw was disease, destitution, and delusion, and a total disregard for the individual, a regard that makes this country we live in the best there is, a light on the hill, a miracle to the world. So I brought you here this morning to show you unity, oneness, a big mix of everything, from the purest water to the foulest excretion the mind can imagine, a population's salivas, defecations, urinations, blood, vomit, and tears, dead rats, dead birds, garbage disposal pulp, drug deals gone wrong, body parts, solvent, things as benign as newspapers and cotton swabs up to perfectly fine, unconsumed food. Probably perfumes too, expensive perfumes. You name it, some of it's in here. And what does it make? That's right, kiddo. Not so pretty, huh? This is a world without boundaries. This is what happens when there are no divisions. Look at it, Xanther. Breathe it in. Breathe it in. Never forget. This is what you get when there is no law. This is what you get when the teeth lose. So, if Yeats was right when he said that an argument with others produces rhetoric and an argument with ourselves produces poetry, then I think the argument with ourselves as we argue with others who are arguing with themselves is literature, which is to say it's messy. It's filled with different vantage points, different characters who are passionate about their point of view. And that was one little snippet of Xanther, a 12-year-old girl who finds the cat in the familiar, reflecting upon her biological father. The last section I'm going to read is from Esther's point of view, her mother. And there was a bit of a mishap between mother and daughter. So mother is trying to make it up to daughter by taking her to a very special place where they train wild animals for the movies. Seeing that the second big cage holds only dogs, Esther asks Cashel to direct her toward a restroom. But on her way there, Astaire for a moment doubts the way, fears she will have to make do off to the side, squatting behind some tarantula-owned rock, until she spots across a road and down some steps, just as Cashel promised, the small house. The door's unlocked. No one's in. A gloomy place. Distressed shag maroon carpet disappears to die beneath heavily shellacked bookcases loaded with veterinarian books. The immediate kitchen is a narrow alley of stove and sink, counter-crowded with bottles of hydrogen peroxide and tubes of neosporin, scissors too beside rolls of medical tape and wads of gauze, brown enough to keep Astaire from investigating further. On the wall is a critter-gitter clock, time at the service of a lion and a hyena, with an elephant stampeding the second hand. The bathroom is just as overwrought, encrusted with dirt, which Astaire determines with a fingernail is no such thing, unless years of hardening have produced this current dark epoxy. Everything else is leopard. Leopard wallpaper, leopard towels, leopard candles, and even a leopard toilet seat. Astaire hovers. She also never nears the sink, those smeared faucets. A tarantula-infested rock would have been better. The only thing she touches on her way out is the light switch. Leopard. Is this where Abigail revels in her sweet sweat, semen-soaked entanglements? Astaire wants to gag. She's nowhere close to gagging. What could have possessed Abigail to have even crossed the threshold? Is she really this lonely? Astaire doesn't even realize how tight her chest has gotten, like a man's fist, she imagines, until she steps outside. Something about the dinginess offends her. Astaire isn't even thinking of the jeans and boxers hugged over the hair-matted sofa or the muddy boots on the coffee table. She's thinking about all of it. The stink for sure, for sure. She sneezes now, twice more, her throat itches, eyes too. Allergies? Still better than the way she felt inside, flushed. Envious? Something's at her feet. Can she even call it a cat? What a grizzled thing, gray with just a glint of green in one eye. The other eye is marble white. Ick. The ear above the ick, is no more than a hole surrounded by spidery threads of flesh. The whole left side is nothing more than a few tufts of ashen hair, except where there is no hair at all. A substantial trench digs alongside the spine through the ribs and down into the rear flank, rendering a back leg pretty useless. The tail is just gone. Nonetheless, this tortured thing rubs against Astaire's ankle, even after she recoils. Its mew, or is it a purr, a harsh grate of improbable survival, only stops when nearby, very nearby, just up the hill, crowned in brush, something else unleashes its thunder. Astaire feels gripped by the bones, the teeth. What the fuck was that? What Astaire has every intention of asking Cashel as she's letting herself through the big gate, only to freeze at the sight of Gus and Vito and Juno frozen before the last big cage. Something about that last cage now beginning to dawn on Astaire, along with, where is Cashel? Where's Xanther? Dark shapes moving inside, way, way bigger than dogs, not dogs at all. Astaire is sprinting, breath quickening, already breathing way too hard, until she's not even breathing. Another fist in her chest, this one a much different kind, as Astaire reaches the fencing to discover yellow eyes and a swirl of black fur and teeth clicking in low guttural growls. Wolves, 5 of them, and all circling frantically and shaking their heads repeatedly and lunging out suddenly to snap before withdrawing just as fast to continue circling. And the center of their attention, the object of these attacks, her baby girl, sitting cross-legged, alone, until adrenaline sharpens Astaire's perceptions. Cashel's in there too, with a baton, but cornered by the biggest wolf. No, not the biggest. The biggest has just clamped its jaws on her daughter's arm, twisting to rip it away, rip it off, tears Xanther apart. "Mom!" Xanther cries, which is when everything goes messy. Adrenaline misplaced, gushing for nowhere now, against conflicting sights and tones. Saliva returns to Astare's mouth. The beating in her chest slows as her body starts to relax, even if her mind persists in trying to command all of her to keep tensing. Tense still more. Do this something more, damn it. Mom, Xanther cries. Come in. Cashel looks just as happy. The second biggest wolf before her, a blur of charcoal and snow, has just rolled over, wanting something from Cashel to play with, while the biggest wolf, with Xanther, a blonde billow of heavy shoulders and bright eyes, continues to rip away at what's only a frayed blanket, red, which Xanther playfully withholds until, overpowered, she lets go of with a squeal. Aren't they amazing? They are, but they think she's more amazing. Cashel notices it too, especially when Xanther stands up. Immediately, Cashel's attendant, wolf, wheels around to rejoin the pack, fall in behind the blonde alpha, who pays no mind to the rest, paying close attention only to every move Astare's 12-year-old makes. Only Xanther is oblivious, practically skipping across the cage to meet Astare at the gate. The blonde alpha drops his prized blanket to keep close to Xanther, too close, teeth nearly nicking those fragile heels, even as the pack hangs back, if still tuned to the flitting motion of Xanther's hands, her bobbing head and dancing knees, as if they soon might earn some anticipated reward. She's special, Cashel says later, after Xanther goes to find the bathroom. I'm partial, Astare responds, her practiced tone of neutrality in effect. You start together, Cashel continues, in her tone leaking with confession or just curiosity. That's the way you're supposed to start, because, they know me. And then you sit down so you're lower than them, or the same height, but not higher, which would make you maybe more leaderish and definitely more of an outsider. But when you're down low, then they treat you like part of the pack, and they come around and sniff you and even pull at that blanket I let your daughter hold, and then you stand up. Like I stood up to be leaderish, see, and I kind of moved away, which is when they usually all follow me. Except this time only Montana followed me, and it was like Cashel's smile changes. It was like he wasn't really following me, but more like trying to separate me and, keep me away. Kind of like the way someone might do at a party, pull someone away so the rest can have a private conversation. Actually, now that I think about it, it was really weird. Astare's heart is at it again, adrenaline back too, except this time, instead of confusion, it's all about anger. Cashel has no clue. They just took to her, the young woman continues. Took to her. Did you see that at the end, how she got up and they fell back like all at once? And Montana left me quick, and like even Quasar, the alpha, healed behind her. I've worked with them for 3 years now, and they never do that for me. Not even toys. Cashel whispers that last part. Not in that way. It's like they knew her, like she was one of them, or all of them. But in charge, Cashel suddenly chuckles, loud too, abrasively. Man, I must be beat. It sounds like I'm calling your kid a werewolf. All Astare wants to do is beat Cashel. Envisions a flurry of fists beating her into bruises and pus, though not with Astare's fists, but heavier and calloused and backed up by brute strength and brute experience. Fists she knows too well because they're doves. At least Astare should shout, "How dare you fucking take my 12-year-old daughter into a den of fucking wolves without my fucking permission, and then dress her up like fucking Little Red Riding Hood? Are you fucking kidding me?" They're a lot like dogs, Astare says instead. The question has the desired effect. Confidence from expertise dispels Cashel's evident unease. They look like dogs, sure, but they're not. See the yellow eyes, the size, and the tails? They never lift the tails above their backside. They're smart, too. Way smarter than your average pooch. You have to trick them to do anything. They won't serve any man, ever. At least that's what Toy says. He should know. They only serve the pack. Astare still can't help but see dogs, even as she sees nothing close to dogs. Actually, the only thing Astare sees is red. Before Cashel leaves, still clueless, she again announces that Toys is only a matter of minutes away. Traffic. Xanther and Astare are welcome to hang out with the dogs or kick back in the mini barn office. With Xanther out of earshot, back by the monkeys, Cashel also asks, sotto voce too, that Astaire not mention, that thing with the wolves? That thing. There's supposed to be all this release of liability paperwork to fill out, and anyhow, you know your daughter, right? Astaire tries to crush every answer, only one, between her teeth, grinding away like she so often tells Xanther not to do, though something in her expression still betrays her. Cashel's eyes widen, her youth suddenly too evident on her soft features. You do know I didn't take her in there, right? I was feeding havoc. She was talking to them, and then she just walked in. Later, long after Cashel's dirty white Corolla left in specters of dust, what Astaire keeps turning over in her head is not this revelation, but a different warning. Xanther had returned from the bathroom slightly spooked. What's up the hill? Yeah, Cashel had tensed. Don't go up there, okay? Please, don't. Thank you. Questions? That silence, by the way, is a nice question. We were all kind of asking, who's going to be the first question? What are they going to say?
So this is a really ambitious project, whereas before you just did one book and then one other book and then just one experiment and then one experiment. I guess it's two parts. One, what's your storyboarding process to decide I am going to make a couple dozen books and it'll be exactly this amount, and have you already thought what that last book's going to look like, and then just fill it in the middle, or just shoot from the hip? And then the second question is, what made you decide to do that transition from the one book to giant series?
So the first question is a little like the second question. What made me want to stop just writing books and write this big multi-volume series? And what was that transition like, right? And what is my process for outlining such a project? Well, first of all, The Familiar is, if it happens in its entirety, will be 27 volumes long, and it approximates a television show in the same way that House of Leaves is based on film, Only Revolutions is about music, the 50-Year Sword is the campfire story. The Familiar is the television series, and every 5 volumes is what I call a season. So there will be 5 seasons with a little extra at the end. And I know exactly how it ends. I also know that it'll end 10 years from now, and a lot can happen in 10 years, and ends can change, but that's also part of the fun. But I've been working on this since 2006, so over 10 years have already gone into it. Thousands and thousands of pages have been written. It was a thrill for me to read the Hyperion section, because that lived, and then it died, and then it lived, and then it was brought back. It was going to live in volume 1, and then it was cut. When I wrote volume 1, I ended up cutting about, I think, almost 100,000 words to get it down into its shape. So 100,000 words is roughly 2 Great Gatsbys. And for volume 2, probably about 40 or 50,000 words, and for this one, probably less. I'm slowly starting to figure it out, which is really the way these works happen. I mean, I spend such a long time on the books that it's, I'd love to shoot from the hip, by the way. But I've never been able to do that. So House of Leaves, because it was so much about film, began to address the sort of cinematic grammar that I learned from my father, who was a filmmaker, in the ways that filmmakers manipulate the viewer's emotional response. So you can lead your eye to a corner, and if the next cut puts the focus down here, the eye is going to have to jerk down to find this focus. And that kind of optic energy creates a sense of anticipation. So all the chase scenes and fight scenes are typically done that way. Whereas if you want to quiet your audience, then you kind of move them you follow like the point of focus. Let's say it's a car here, and then the next cut is the person is here walking in to get some coffee, and you gently lead the eye around, and it's not something you're really aware of. But House of Leaves worked with a lot of those techniques. So the Labyrinth chapter 9, it's very, it's difficult, it's slow going. You have to go backwards in the chapter. The type is small, the languages are difficult. And then the next chapter, you're reading a few sentences per page, and you're flying through it, and suddenly you've read 100 pages in 7 minutes. And that's kind of that visceral experience that we have when we're watching movies. With Only Revolutions, which is a far more complex book, and I always say that people who are reading the House of Leaves, like, that's the book you want to go under the surface. And in the familiar, you want to go under the surface, but you also want to stay on the surface. And in Only Revolutions, you only want to stay on the surface. If you go under the surface, you'll drown. So you have to blur right across the top. You got to get comfortable with not knowing what's going on. And a lot of that is about music. There's a lot of technical work there, but you're not going to experience it unless you play it. You have to be that instrument, which is difficult. But again, the themes of that book, the musicality of the book, the experience of two 16-year-olds who are in love forever, and yet it only seems to be a long summer, those began to dictate the shape of that project so that it suddenly became 360 pages, 360 words per page, the way it kind of mirrored the cycles of seasons and whatnot. And so the familiar did have different forms, but as I began to listen to it, as I began to listen to these characters that began to populate it, as I traveled to Singapore to do the research on Singlish and the character Jing Jing, it began to sort of create its own structure. And actually, I was thinking of Singapore as I was coming over here, because Singapore is also very hot, but it's more humid. But they have a wonderful expression where they say there's only 2 seasons in Singapore, inside and outside. I think that's why I brought the hoodie, because maybe it was going to be winter outside. I think that's a start to your question. Yeah.
Well, I actually had a different question, but kind of following on to that based on your answer. You had you said you segmented this in seasons of 5 books each, with 2 extra. Well, maybe this would be something you can't give it away. Is there something magical or significant about number 27 that you're trying to adhere to? Do you have to cut down words from your book so that you're getting into 27 volumes and not 28 or 30 or whatever?
So the question is about the magic of the number 27, or the magic of numerics in general, and certainly a little investigation into numbers brings about all sorts of revelations. I was just reading an article today about, in some ways, the magic of mathematics. It's a physicist was describing in the Times how it was sort of magical that mathematics fit so beautifully with physics. That there was this entirely abstract language that, when you followed through on its rules, revealed things that were later proven to exist in the universe, right? And so numbers is definitely part of the world we live in, whether we want to be aware of it or not. They have a certain kind of rhythm that shapes us, that moves us, and it's something that I always wanted to admit into my work. So Only Revolutions was very specific in that way. There were structures, architectural structures in House of Leaves, and in this one, yes, there's a certain amount of importance to the numbers, but not too much. And I'm not going to say more about that because I can't give it away. But at the same time, I think the other thing to realize is that I do believe in constraints. So a lot of the time we inherit these forms. They can be very formal, the sonnet or villanelle, or the way the novel is supposed to look. Remember, novel was always supposed to be something that was new, it was vibrant, But the novel, because of the industry, has slowly become, codified to be this 350-page book that has a certain spine width that can fit on a shelf and a certain kind of set of parameters, and you don't want it to be too heavy because there's shipping costs. And slowly, whether you want to admit it or not, these are beginning to impinge on your creativity. So, do I want to follow these old forms that originated out of, things that are maybe not as trustworthy as we want to believe they are. And in very much this is how we live our lives too. We inherit certain things. We inherit certain sort of numerics in our life that we sort of take gratis and think are true. What I've discovered is that by really living with the material and loving it, because what I do, I love all of these characters in this book, they begin to tell me what their numerics are. They tell me where they are in the cage or beyond the cage. And slowly, it begins to take shape, in a way that has a harmony that is not in contradiction to numbers, but it's not also at the expense of content either, because I think that's how we live our life, by the pulses of our heart, wounds of our synaptical imagination, all of that. First in the back, yes.
I want to say thank you for House of Leaves. It's been a great inspiration for me, and it's helped me through some difficult times. I did have an experience with a house that I would classify very similar to House of Leaves. There's something that I can't explain that happened there.
And you survived. Congratulations.
Thank you, because my best friend and I, we've always loved your book, House of Leaves. And I want to say thank you for pushing past that and providing more stories, more content. All of your stories have very unique themes. So my question to you is, have you ever had something in your life that was kind of outside of the realm of explanation, maybe supernatural, paranormal, that you take with you? Have you ever experienced anything like that, or something that you've ever had happen to you?
So the question is, have I ever had an experience that goes beyond explanation? Whether we want to call it paranormal or supernatural, or and of course what you want to hear is a ghost story. And the real answer is just going to disappoint the hell out of you. But maybe that's a good thing, because if you disappoint the hell out of someone, right, then hell is actually, exorcised from them. So maybe there is a virtue in disappointment. I will disappoint you so much that you will have to let go of hell. But I experience that every day, every moment, even this moment. I think if one is willing to really, lift one's eyes from that little screen that we're told is so important with all its little metrical parameters, and sort of begin to experience this foam of atomic wonder that we inhabit so briefly. I am constantly surprised by things I have no idea about, and I think the frightening thing is really to be open to that, because it's everywhere. We can come up with reasons, but we can't necessarily, be entirely certain about them, whether it is what a person is saying or what another person's feeling, a relationship you're in. I mean, one more little turn back to the numbers was just the notion of, I was sort of boggled when a mathematician friend said, there really isn't such a thing as infinity. It's an idea that we've constructed, but we can't actually perceive infinity. We can't experience that except by, whatever, elongating a series, etc. To understand something that's fathomless. But I think that kind of experience pervades moment. Though, yeah, there was a story when I was at Burning Man that was pretty wild. I really don't have time to tell you. It takes a while to tell. We should really be kind of in a circle. There should be a bonfire. We should be going through about a few hours of like, nah, and then everyone tells their ghost story, and then I say, well, let me tell you a story. But were it not for that moment, I probably would not have continued writing The Familiar. So, if I'm lucky to come back to Phoenix, maybe for Volume 5, then maybe I will tell that story. More disappointment, right?
I kind of have two questions on a similar idea. One's more general, one more specific. The more general one is, how do you go about integrating and composing the graphic portions of the novel and sort of mixing them really well together so they thematically reinforce each other? a specific question off of that is I really like the section with the computer code and some of the Hopi mythology words that are sprinkled in there. And so I'm wondering, does that sort of reinforce the text just mythologically and thematically, or does that code actually kind of come out of the text and run on a computer?
Good question. Question is how do I integrate the writing with the visual elements? I mean, it's all writing, right? I mean, how do I balance, I guess, the verbal with the graphic? And then, you know, the question about if you look more specifically at certain moments, like the actual code that's used, you know, what's generating that code? Is it the code that's generating the book itself, or is the book influencing what's in the code, right?
Yeah.
And this, weirdly enough, wends back to the question of transition, our first question. Transition's also a great word, and I totally skipped out on that part. But when I wrote Only Revolutions, I was that writer, which at least the older people in this room know, where I got to do everything I wanted. I mean, down to the number of words. I mean, the metrics, the rhyming schemes, the subject matter, the colored letters, you know, the designing of the flaps, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, I was lauded enough to get nominated for a National Book Award, and I had nothing in my life. Everything had just, like Sam and Haley's, you know, innocent love, it had burned everything to the ground around me. Relationships had failed. I had become, you know, as much as I was investigating their ego trip, I became aware of my own ego trip. And I realized I was in a place where I had to make a choice. Am I going to pursue this notion of the writer who's in control of everything and has to have everything his or her way? And am I going to keep insisting on it and be one of these old men who's crossing the street yelling at every car that's near him? I still do that. And I remember making a conscious choice that the time had come. I didn't want to be that writer. I didn't want to be, you know, like Pynchon or Salinger, or just pick a recluse, you know, however they lived, the Unabomber. And I said, you know, I'm going to open up. I'm going to open the window and open the door. I'm going to let people into my life, and I'm going to let go of control. And I'm going to add a footnote to this, all right? Because I was packing. I just left Los Angeles this morning, and I was finishing packing, and you know, I traveled a small suitcase, and you know, I put my t-shirts in and my Arctic hoodie, and there was no room left in the bag. And I was like, well, that's fine. Then I thought, well, you know, as I travel around from city to city, there's usually someone who comes along and wants to, you know, give me something, like a book or something, and that's nice. And I have no room for that, right? And then I realized that I'm going to see my goddaughter in DC, and I realized that I hadn't packed a present for her yet, but there was no room for a present. And so I had these weird sort of conflicting ideas, because I recognized that if I was good enough to pack something for someone else, it would make more room for someone new that I hadn't met to sort of, you know, participate here in a way. And the reason it was important is because I could certainly throw out some t-shirts or ship something. Is I realized that I didn't want anything from anyone. Like, at that moment, with my full suitcase, I realized that I was closed off to anyone else. Basically everyone in the room here. And I thought, wow, that's a mess. And that's kind of that older self. And so I emptied my suitcase and started looking for a present. And I realized as I was letting go of things, it would create more room in my life. And that was an important decision. It had nothing to do with writing. It maybe had everything to do with everything that I was reading and experiencing. But at that point, I made this conscious choice to say, okay, let's involve myself, ourselves in this new direction. And consequently, when the 50-Year Sword came out, I ended up through Steve Erickson's help, who's a wonderful novelist, said, why don't you put on the 50-year sword at the Disney Center? And I said, oh, sure, how will we do that? And I'd always heard it as this sort of verbal tale, this oral tale, so I hired actors. We stitched it together, and we did it for three years consecutively on Halloween. But it meant dealing with different personalities. It meant with the designers and artists and people that were flakes and people that were always on time, and just all of these nightmares that were not creative at all, but were incredibly important, to me. And I realized, like, well, this is the way the world works, right? It's not just one sound. It's not one way. Any person that says they have all the answers is a bozo. What you want is the person who says, I'm willing to hear all these different voices and then kind of conduct them into something that can, benefit all of them and benefit other people who can experience that, right? So The Familiar, very much like a television series, as you'll see in the back, depends on an enormous amount of people. So I consult with computer engineers, we talk about things, we talk about what's developing in the book, we talk about how those things can be incorporated into the book, how the book can incorporate some of those themes into the code, what the code will run, what it can reveal. The same thing's going on with those visual elements, working with just various artists, some that I just find on Instagram who do a monster card for Jing Jing, others who are part of the atelier who we work on the themes of, well, what does this cat, do? How do we begin to approach the forest of a mind? Are we just going to build a forest with paint splotches? Well, no, we're going to build a forest out of hashtags and forward slashes, We're going to connect it a little to the coding, but also to the sense of what is a forest of a mind? How do we perceive it? And so there's this wonderful kind of and frightening dependency on others, and even readers as well, who begin to postulate things and tell me what they like and what they want to hear more. Of course that's going to affect it. I'll remember when someone was talking about Mephisto as a very important character, and I was like, oh wow, this person really likes Mephisto. You got to have another Mephisto chapter in there somewhere, And it's not so open-ended that it will, it'll go off the rails, but at the same time, it's 27 volumes. There's some room, I haven't filled it to the edge like my suitcase, There's plenty that can go in there and plenty that can be given out.
We got time for one more question.
Oh. Yes.
I have one question. It's from a writer's perspective. What is your best advice to an aspiring writer besides, write?
What is my best advice to an aspiring writer beside write? It's amazing how the answer always lies right after beside. Well, I can only offer you what I've said before, and I say it to myself pretty much every day, is write what you love. Because if you love something, you've got to know what that thing is, And if you write what you love, it will hold you during the hard times, and it will hold us during the good times. Thank you.
So before you guys get up, I just want to explain how the signing will work. Mark is happy to personalize anything you have. We'll have Joel going through the line with Post-its if you don't already have one in your book, so he knows who to sign to. Otherwise, we're going to have the line start just right here at the mic stand and kind of curl around up against the wall over here. So if you guys want to start lining up, if you can't stay, we can get your book signed for you.